Okay, hey YouTube's internet. I am now recording a video about books. And reading books is one of my favorite pastimes. I have read lots and lots of books. I've read books for educational purposes, I've read books for leisure purposes, I've read books in preparation for exams, certifications and things like that. So I've read lots and lots of books. So the books I'm going to talk about today are um, Blink by Malcolm Gladwell and Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And these, now I've read the conventional books also, like Rich Dad Poor Dad and the was it Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, I think. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Um, what else? I've read so many of the conventional wisdom books. Getting to Yes. Um, what else? I've read. I am currently on Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature, but I've read the other books by Robert Greene, the 33 Laws of Strategies of War, I think it is, the 48 Laws of Power, Seduction, Mastery, and I think I've read one more by him, but I know I've read those four. And um, so, and I have not finished reading The Laws of Human Nature. You can see my handy dandy bookmark is still in the first opening pages of the book at page, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but at page 16, page 17. It's a pretty hefty book. It's actually, how many pages? It's actually, now I'm including the index, but it is 609 pages. Woo-wee, 609 pages. But I am going to make it through the book by God's grace. And also looking at Sacred Woman, which is more of a cultural text. It's a cultural, spiritual text. And then finally, looking at the Bible. My Bible has been through a lot. I have like my notes in my Bible, but the Holy Bible. So you can see it on the spine, the Holy Bible. Okay, so let's start with Outliers, The Story of Success by Malcolm Gladwell. I've read this book. It is a good book, and it talks about how certain things that you think make people outliers are maybe a little different than what you expected. Like sometimes a consequence of age, a consequence of, um, being born in a certain place, and certain things that make people predisposed to certain types of success. Like, I think one of the examples was maybe, I think it was hockey players who have a birthday at a certain time of the year. And which makes them competitive because they're older when they go into the season for hockey, which starts close to the time when the person is advancing in age. Um, so it's a very good book, and I recommend it. It took me a long time to actually pick the book up from the bookstore because I have been meaning to read it for many years. I read about it, or I seen advertisements for it, sometime in the past, and I wanted to get the book. It was actually the copyright is in 2008, and I read it probably 2 to 3 years ago. So that's The Outliers. Then Malcolm Gladwell has another book called Blink. And Blink is about decision making. And I had a page here that I wanted to just read because I think it was saying something to the effect that decision making is the difference between instinct and being deliberate. Now that's not the exact words, but it's a rough summary of what one of the paragraphs in the text was saying, that there's a distinction between being deliberate and operating from instincts, but your decisions are very, very important, and this book talks about how people make decisions and sort of the why of why people make decisions that they make. So it's a very good book. I read this book. I read these books like in close proximity to each other, like about 2 or 3 years ago. I picked up one, then went back to the store, picked up the other one, and then just read through them. Okay. Now the next book I'll discuss is, I'll just give a short snippet. The Laws of Human Nature. I have not read in its totality. I've watched a few interviews about the laws of human nature, and the other books are really good. Now the thing is, with the other books, they were very hard for me to read when I initially started reading the books because they challenged so much of what I thought about life. Having been, in church for a significant period of my life and listening to the doctrines of church and those types of the teachings of church, reading those books really caused me to consider things I hadn't considered in the past. And it was just really, really challenging. And then it's very detail specific, very detail oriented, and it's in story form. So they're like stories, and then this is the takeaway from the story. This is the story. This is the takeaway from the story. I don't want to give too much away, about the book, but the way Robert Greene tells a story, I think, and tells different stories, I think is very, very unique and very, very instructive, inspiring. I don't know if inspiring is the right word, but when you are reflecting and someone can tell a story and you reflect and see how your life could be impacted by that particular story, then I think that's a mark of a person who's really captured something in connecting with people. So when I get through this book, it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but when I get through this book, I plan to upload another video about the book, The Laws of Human Nature. And this is, of course, by God's grace. So the next book I'll discuss is Sacred Woman. So this is Sacred Woman, and this is a pretty unconventional text. This text is, I'm a sacred woman, and it's a process, an initiation, like a rites of passage that you go through at a certain point in your life, and you may associate with a particular community of women, and you go through this kind of spiritual process. It has things such as you have an altar, and you do affirmations, and there is a reverence for, being a woman, and there's certain other things like certain exercises you go through as part of the ritual, and certain other things, paying attention to your diet and the things that you take into your body, and then going through a healing process all at the same time. So it's a very, very very comprehensive text, and I think it is good for a specific point in a person's life. And so this is the book, Sacred Woman. Sacred Woman. So that I'm going to now speak about the last text, and the last text is the Bible. Now, people say, well, how could you do Sacred Woman and do the Bible? Each person has to work out his or her own soul's salvation. And, I am a woman of faith, and I pray to God. And one thing I did do, and I have read this book this complete book. I've read the complete book of the Outliers, the complete book of Blink, and I've read, believe it or not, I have read the entire Bible. This is the Bible. I've read the entire Bible. This is not the copy that I read. So this one doesn't have my notes in it and like my highlighting. But this is but I read the whole Bible and the King James version, and I've read the New Testament more than once. And then every day I may go to a scripture. I may read Psalms. I may read Proverbs. I may read a little of Genesis, or I may read part of the Gospels. I may read, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st, 2nd, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st, 2nd, Corinthians, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st, 2nd Peter, 1st and 3rd John, Jude, Revelation. So that's the New Testament. So I said that really quickly, but that's the New Testament, and then the Old Testament, just Exodus, Leviticus, so on and so forth. So reading through the Bible, and it's the Proverbs are a book of wisdom. The Psalms are the books of praise that David was the psalmist who gave praise to God in the Psalms. And then there are other books of the Bible that were written by various people, followers of Christ, and then there were also texts written in the Old Testament. So because Christ is introduced in the New Testament, in the Old Testament is predominantly about God, and then there is Jesus in the Gospels, in the New Testament, and the crucifixion of Christ and the resurrection of Christ, and then the speaking to the idea of Gentiles and Jews, and so forth and so on. But I read the whole Bible. I need to say the Bible. You can read the Bible one time, and that does nothing for. Not that it does nothing, but you would have to continue to read it over and over again, because every time you read the Bible, you get something different from it. It's like when you read other books, you get something different from the books every time you read them. So this is my short and brief overview of a few of the books that I've read, and I have a few that I am looking to read in the near future. So this is Antoinette signing off, and looking forward to hearing from you, your comments, and like and subscribe.